And so, in this moment, to just be here so present that there's no signal to attend to anything. There's no signal, no alert to attend to anything. So that there's no trying and no efforting. So that this moment has no expectations. That this moment can actually just be fully as it is, without any imposition that comes from the mental conceptual realms that have been learned and have ideas of how this moment should be. A relaxation and a softening. And in that, a natural sense of being that just is, that you're here just as you are, just as you are. There's no particular way to show up. There's no one that needs to be seen or understood. There's a simple naturalness in just being here, just as you are, in the simplicity of now. And what a relief to just let go of all of those ideas that we have accumulated and gathered and conceptualized, and that we start creating a sense of persona out of these ideas of this is how it should be, this is how it needs to be. This makes me a good person. This makes me a spiritual person. This makes me a conscious person, right? Let it all go, right? Just to be wild, just to be untamed, untamed by those ideas and concepts. To be untamed by all of the ways that we think it should be. And to actually find out what it is to be just as you are, to truly be yourself. That the wildness of spirit is not tamed and organized and ordered. It's not controlled and contrived. It's not protected and conditioned. Do we dare to truly be free and wild and fresh and exuberantly joyful and open and free? Right? We're longing for it. We're longing for it. But do we dare to actually be the fullness of the glory of the true essential nature without imposing any ideas, without needing to fix or change, without needing to create any kind of filter or persona? How am I being seen? How am I being received? Am I safe here? Right? All of the ways that there's a constant underlying angst that is reading the environment and trying to respond to what is in the environment in the fullness of the moment, to do it right. Because underneath that impulse, that instinctive learned impulse to do it right, is one that believes there's something wrong with me. I could do it wrong, right? There's one underneath that that believes there's something wrong with me. I may not be received here. I may not be accepted. I may not be loved. I may not be nourished. I may not be seen or understood, right? Because in the very young life, it's most likely that there were ways, even if we were loved in the best possible ways that were available, that we were not nourished and mirrored and held as a true reflection of the glory and the light that we came in as. And even then, the coming in, we've already been housed in an environment that has affected us, right? Even the growing of the baby has been housed in an environment that has affected us. So we come in with this radiant light, and yet already there are certain attunements that have been made. There's certain frequencies that have been absorbed and taken on. It's almost as if we've been made out of these frequencies. And of course, none of that ever dims or changes the light that we are. But we start right from the get-go, just as bundles of cells, taking on and drinking in these frequencies that are subtly and not so subtly always discordant, right? So we're so attuned from the get-go to feel like frequencies of fear and discord and uncertainty and mistrust, right? Because we've been housed and grown and birthed into environments where that was the atmospheric vibration, right? And so innocently, unconsciously, there's ways that within our human lived experience, there are these filters and protections that start to feed the subtle messages that we interpret within our functioning as dimming and dialing down the light that we are, the glorious intelligence and the profound unconditional love that we are. And ultimately, it's about returning in our lived experience to what we have always been, without imagining that we come to the truth of who we are through fixing, changing, being worthy, achieving, and moving in ways that are about problem solving and fixing ourselves to be in accord with what we imagine that we have to be aligned with. That ultimately we have a deep knowing of our divinity, of our purity. We have a deep knowing of our essential innocence. And it's really about attuning to this essential innocence. And the attuning to the essential innocence happens in a frequency field of total welcoming, which is essentially love, right? It's the frequency of universal love. And it's really like a remembrance that the presence of love is always here. And that our learned experience in the very beginning of the human life, that maybe the full frequency of divine love, of unconditional love, is not here, so I'm not safe, and I'm not being nourished by a frequency that's untainted, right? That we read the environment and we start trying to map ourselves to what is the atmosphere and the environment, instead of mapping ourselves to the divine and our true nature. We somehow start adapting and mapping ourselves in order to get our needs met. And we start learning these ways of being that become then a learned way of living a human life in condition, limitation, in the great misunderstanding of being divided from love, from universal divine love, from pure love, when all the while in the timeless now, it's not actually the truth, right? In the play of time and space, it feels to be true. And the lived experience of the human life feels very real in time and space because it's multidimensional. And yet, in the dimension of reality, love has never divided. The light has never dimmed. And when we come to this total presence and relaxation, we remember the essential truth that love has never divided. Love has never taken on conditions. Love has always been all-encompassing and welcoming. Love is still all-encompassing and welcoming. And in that all-encompassing, welcoming naturalness of love, love is attempting through the play of life to actually pull itself out of the dream of separation and back into the remembrance of the frequency field of reality, the kingdom of God, the glory of God, the purity of divine innocence, whatever we want to call it. The words don't matter. It's all about the resonant vibration of the field, which is the frequency of perfect love, of spotless love. And we know this. We know this because we are it, right? We don't need to learn it. We absolutely know it. And yet the longing for it takes us through all kinds of meandering paths in the play of life, trying to earn it, achieve it, bargain for it, give it where it can't be received, be upset when it's not being received. Right? All of the ways that we dance through life with these misinterpretations of what love is, when all the while love is right here, and our heart in its true openness knows this love without question. And so we could say, in a way, this life is about the remembrance of love. And in a way, the way to remember love is to love. What can we love? How can we love in a way that is safe? We could say we can love the divine. We can love God. We can love the Divine Mother. We can love love. We can love truth. We can open to the longing of the heart to know this love and just be in love with the pull and the longing of the heart. And this carries us really beautifully, because essentially to actually love, to love the divine, and to turn our attention to the field that we might call the divine or God or truth or love or purity or openness, peace. But somehow there can still be this mistrust that keeps pulling us back, keeps pulling us back. And so it's as if we can give with one hand and then we take it back with the other, because we're longing for it. And I want to give it, I want to give my whole self to it. And yet, I'm not quite sure what that looks like, what that means. It's this deep mistrust and this deeply held belief that there's something wrong with me, something wrong with life, a belief we could even say in darkness, a belief that there's an opposite to light and it's dark and it's scary and there's fear, right? So this dance in the human life is a dance of opening to love and remembering love. And opening in such a way that we're rebalancing the play of the sense of personal heart and infinite unbounded heart within our lived experience to bring a harmonizing where we open to not a trust in love, not a trust in God, but it's something deeper. And we could call that a faith. We could call that a pure devotion. It's opening to that within that does know this truth. And so it requires for us to access in the sense of being, in the sense of presence, that which does know the frequency of love, the frequency of yes, the frequency of wholeness. And we're accessing this frequency of knowing within us. And the frequency of knowing is within the felt sense of being. We could say the aware being, that we discover that what we can trust, what we can have faith in, is that which never moves and changes. The constant, the only constant. And that when we attune and we open within our inner landscape to that which never moves and changes, we're opening to the frequency field of reality, where we're not fixing our mistrust by learning to trust people and things and experiences, or even ourselves in our human capacity. We're not learning to trust. We're tapping into something that could not be mistrusted because it's so eternally and essentially real here now. And it's our lived direct experience of being, right? So there's something so incredibly precious about this moment, and the presence of now that we can so easily overlook. We can mentally conceptualize it and say, oh, yes, I know presence. I've been sitting in presence for years, right? I'm a meditator. I've been on a spiritual path. I know presence. Yep. But actually, are you the living presence? Are you living in the reality of being the presence of now? Are you discarding the most precious diamond that you are and discarding it for the grit of the lived human experience and the great misunderstanding of separation, living as grit, right? Living kind of in a denial and avoidance of the diamond of presence, that you are the living presence. And in the living presence, there's this open access to reality through your own lived experience, direct experience, that doesn't require anything external or anyone's permission. It's a profound autonomy to enter the field of the infinite, unbounded, eternal reality, to enter the kingdom of God, to enter the glory of the heart through your own knowing, and to know that your knowing, your beingness, your presence is the key to the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And that we're so habituated in the human life to feel like, oh yeah, but I've got these things I'm busy with this, I'm busy with that, I've got all this stuff going on. And all of this that keeps us distracted, it's fine, it's totally fine, it's part of the human lived experience. but we can be constantly overlooking the presence in order to be somehow living a life where we're trying to be seen, trying to be understood, trying to relate, trying to prove our worthiness, trying to play the game of life in all of the ways that make us feel acceptable and accepted. And we're constantly overlooking the diamond of our own presence and actually living absorbed in the reality and being everything that we're longing for. Everything that we're longing for is here. Working on our mistrust, working on trusting better, right? All of it essentially is a waste of time, because until we are living in the frequency of love, if we're trying to solve the problem in the frequency of fear and we're still broadcasting from the frequency of fear, then that will be our lived experience. There's nothing we can do to change the play of discordance and dysfunction within our behaviors and protections at the level of effect. We cannot change and resolve at the same frequency of consciousness that the discordance was created at. So in a way, the relational field is an opportunity to see where we are in dysfunction and discordance. It's never about anyone else. It's never about someone else, something else, a situation. Never. It's always about our own inner discordant frequencies. And so the play of life and the relational field is this great opportunity to get a reflection of where we are obviously creating from a frequency of fear, of lack, of doubt, where we're living ultimately and broadcasting from a frequency that believes that I am divided from God, from love. I'm unworthy, undeserving of love, of intimacy, of care, of depth, right? Where there's this deep held belief, and it will have been created in the young life, somewhere is a misunderstanding. And within the consciousness of the family, and with the ways that the relationships, the relational frequencies have been set up with our parents and caregivers, that we created these unconscious contracts, these unconscious commitments, because we learned in the very young life that this is how I get my needs met. This is survival, and therefore this is love. We learn that this is love. So we learn love is emotional unavailability. We learn love is to stay shut down and safe. We learn that love is rejection. Love is to stay miserable and not be too happy because the atmosphere in your family home isn't happy, and you don't want to leave the tribal consciousness that says, don't be too happy, don't shine too bright, don't leave the atmosphere that we're living in, you know? Your mother's not feeling well, be quiet. So we learn, oh, being quiet is love, right? Don't make too much noise. Oh, not making too much noise is love. We learn that to not get the things that we would like is love, right? Scarcity. We learn to live within these structures and confines, and they become like an unconscious programming from where we live our life, and where we're broadcasting from, where we're creating from. We're creating from these unconscious structures that have allowed us to get our needs met in the young life. And yet those structures then end up remaining, and we end up living our life and recreating out of these patterns of limitation, of discordance, constantly feeling disappointed on a certain level, and yet somehow being pulled into it again and again, because there's this unconscious idea that we're loving, that there's some kind of love here, that I'm loving my family, I'm staying committed to my family here by living out these karmic frequencies. And so the life can feel kind of discordant. It feels like we're working so hard to free ourselves and to come to live this truth. But there are these unconscious programs that are running, these unconscious frequency patterns that are running, that because they're unconscious, we don't know that they're there. And we can try and work within the psychological functioning, and we can get to a certain level, but we really only get to the deepest rooted unconscious as we open to the frequency of love, of perfect love, because the deepest unconscious will only open and reveal itself when it feels absolutely safe, because it learnt in the young life, well, it's not safe to shine. It's not safe to be at the frequency of perfect love. It's not safe to be the glory of the fullness of the light. Right? So we learn that it's not safe to actually be the living glory that we are. But we can only really unravel this deep, deep holding, like the linchpin, right, of the great misunderstanding that it's possible to be divided from God and the glory, that we believe that we are divided. And then we believe that somehow I've been rejected, neglected, and abandoned by God, so I'm not going to love God. I'm not going to love the divine. I'm not going to give myself, right? So we start to feel within our functioning the kind of stickiness of the giving with one hand and the taking back with the other, that we're longing for it, we're falling into it, and we're opening, and we're having deep realizations in the revelatory field, but then these unconscious patterns keep pulling us back in, and then it's, what's going on here? I'm trying everything. I'm giving myself. I feel like I'm so committed, but there's these unconscious frequencies that are not committed, not committed to love. They're committed to fear. And we don't know how to access them, right? So let's say we only access them as we are in a joined field that holds the frequency where the unconscious is called forward by a frequency where it actually feels safe to be illuminated. And then within our inner functioning, the light that we are has the capacity to illuminate the discordance just through illumination. It's magic. It's so powerful, but the technology of light is to illuminate. And once the light shines upon a shadow, it's no longer a shadow, it's light, right? True nature is revealed, right? It's the same. What has taken shape, seems to be shadow, when the light shines upon it, is revealed to be the same substance. And there's a reconciliation at the level of frequency where the original pattern is restored. The pure consciousness is restored. And this is the process, really, of a true human life being lived as a movement of, let's say, it's an intelligent process of consciousness remembering its unity, consciousness unifying itself intelligently as a process of illumination and revealment, revealing the patterns, revealing the essence, nature of everything as being one and the same. And as this revealing of essence nature opens and is discovered to be one field of light, the frequency field of love, which is the unconditional field that is ever free, untamed, fresh, jubilant, gloriously happy, and in awe and wonder of itself, is revealed to have always been here. And so it's as if we touch into it. We touch into it because we know it and we are it. But we're so habituated to live in the patterns of protection, and we're so habituated to try to be seen and make relationships in these discordant ways. We're so habituated to try to create this idea of love, which isn't actually truly love. And this is an amazing revelation, that if we don't know the love that we are, then what are we actually doing in our relationships? What actually is that in our relationships? If we don't actually know what love is, then what is this thing that we're calling love? Right? It's not love. Because love with conditions is not love. Love with conditions is something else entirely. It's attraction. It's a relational bargaining tool, but it's not love, right? And yet, of course, we come into moments where we can feel the aliveness of love. But as soon as we imagine that that love is out there, or we enter relational dynamics where we're disappointed by someone else's ability to receive love or join in love or engage in love or meet me in love, what's being shown to us is that we're not fully in the knowing of what love is. Because love loves. Love doesn't judge. Love doesn't have conditions. Love doesn't bargain. Love doesn't violate, right? Love doesn't play games. Love doesn't compromise. Love just loves. And when we're truly in the frequency of love, then the wholeness that we are needs nothing from the world, right? And emanates as a frequency of love that just loves, right? So then what are we up to in all of the ways that we think that we're loving, right? It's not that there isn't some quality of true love there. It's not that there's some quality, but it's such an interesting contemplation, right? And so much of this unfolding is about the ability to be so honest with our own deep ways of being, our assumptions, our beliefs, our concepts, the ways that we're so sticky in our dynamics of relating, how we have expectations and wants and needs, and that actually isn't love. Love is pure. And yet somehow the whole relational field is this great opportunity to refine our misconceptions, to actually see our delusions, right? Ooh, ouch, right? Yeah, because the great glory comes when what gets reflected back to us is not what we think, like, you deceived me, you betrayed me, you're not capable of meeting me here, you're not giving me what I want, this isn't working for me. We stop being at this frequency and we start realizing, wow, I hate you because you're reflecting my own delusion to me. I'm mad with you because you're reflecting the depth of my delusion to me, right? I'm mad with you because you won't give me what I want because I haven't been willing to meet myself here, right? It's a field that can feel frenzied with emotional discordance. And yet there's so much power and possibility as we're willing to actually pull all the threads back and meet ourselves here, because what we find out we're meeting is our mother, our father. We're meeting our early relationships. In every relationship, we're meeting the dynamics that were set up and that are unconscious through our relationships. We're meeting what we're creating as a relational field, and that no one else is responsible but our own deep frequency that we're broadcasting from. So there's something so potent and powerful to the living of life as an openness to the grace that shows us. It's constantly showing us. That's how loving love is. Love is attempting to come back for all of itself, and is so divinely loving with itself that through the whole relational field is attempting to show us where we are not fully meeting our own needs because we learned to get our needs met in dysfunctional ways. And we learned to divide, and we learned to play the victim, and we learned to protect and move within conditional, learned habits. And everything about life is inviting us to be so radically committed to unwinding and seeing through and illuminating the ways that we hold ourselves separate from the love that we are and the love that we're longing for, right? As beloved Rumi said in some incredibly beautiful lyrical way, our job is not to seek for love, but to remove all the barriers that we have created to love. And the curiosity is that it's not even removing the barriers to love so that we can then get a great relationship on the outside. It's removing the barriers to love in order to recognize that there's only one field of love, that there's only one substance, and that is love, and that we are that love, right? So how glorious the intelligence of life really is, right? How glorious the wisdom light is that we have shining inside us in the presence of now. Because in the presence of now, we are the field that has the capacity to receive it all openly and to keep receiving the grace of it all. And to make the shifting not as a fixing and changing, but as an intricate and divine welcoming of all of the parts of us that feel to be broken and divided, all of the parts of us that we have not made true intimacy with, that we are not truly loving with, right? And the work is a depth of intimate meeting of ourselves that we can only do in our inner functioning. However much we would love to involve others in it, it isn't about anyone else. We can share it. Yes, we can share it. We can join in it, but we can't expect anyone else is responsible for being a part of it. It's a journey into our own heart, our own divinity and the love that we are, that we have to make solo. We have to discover and reconcile the parts of ourselves that we have cut off from, the ways that we've made these unconscious commitments to fear and to not be joyful in the full wildness that is possible, to be living in lack and scarcity and doubt and division and limitation, that we've made these commitments unconsciously. And we've come to believe that these ways of functioning are loving because they keep us connected to the tribal consciousness of our parents and our ancestors. And there's a deeply held unconscious belief that if we break those, that we would be breaking a bond of love. But that bond of love is not true love. That bond of love is actually rooted in fear and is keeping us bound in structures of fear and the belief in separation. So we're actually freeing every soul in the line. And we're freeing every soul that is still embodied in the human realm. Every soul that is part of the ancestral line and in the karmic system. And we're also freeing the beings that we may not know, but we have constellational connections with these souls. We may not have met them in this lifetime, but we may have met them and played out these dynamics in other lifetimes. We're also freeing the young beings in our families that are born and are yet to be born, right? So it's very profound when we actually break the bond that we've learned to be a commitment of love. When we break that bond, far from breaking a bond of love, we're pulling out the tangles of the karmic system and the habit of living in this karmic play of relational dynamics that feel dysfunctional. And we're pulling ourselves into living at a frequency of love in a wild, untamed frequency of truth. And we're freeing the dynamics and we're freeing everyone in the relational field to be reorganized and recalibrated by love, to be reorganized and recalibrated by the divine intelligence. And that every being that is still embodied has then the possibility of opening to finer frequencies and shifting within their own functioning to finer possibilities of loving dynamics, even if they don't feel or seem to be working in the same way. We touch it in and as consciousness, we touch the whole field as we shift the consciousness to finer and more refined frequencies. We're opening to what we could even call true healing, right? Because true healing is not about fixing on the level of the surface of life and the play of life. It's about shifting the frequency dynamic from which we're broadcasting and creating the life and living at the frequency of reality. And that shift in frequency is like the shift that we could call the awakening of consciousness. It's where consciousness wakes up to the fullness of itself, where consciousness wakes up to the freedom and purity of itself as being the awake, aware field that is constant, unchanging, right? And this is where we discover a frequency that we could say is akin to a true deep faith or trust, but it's not trust in something. It's a frequency of love that is one. So we could say that true trust is love. True trust is love. True trust is the undivided, unconditional, because we only open to this frequency of trust where we know that there's only one, that we're supported, that we're one with the divine. And once we open to this remembrance that we are one with the divine and that we're cared for, that we're guided and supported in the frequency field of reality of the divine, that we don't need then to be moving in these ways that are trying to fix and change, because we just hand ourselves over. We hand ourselves over to the technology of love, which is the technology of all-inclusive, all-encompassing, welcoming, embrace, and blessing, that just loves. And so it's not a frequency field of I love you because, it's a frequency field of I just love you. I just love you, right? There's no conditions. When we're so used to having an expectation of us and responding to how will I be seen? How will I be loved? How do I need to move to be accepted here? We're so used to just moving at this frequency of division and trying to be seen that we find it almost disconcerting and a little weird and uncanny to be in a frequency field where there's no expectation of us. So where we started this morning, just be here as you are. No posture. You're loved. You're welcome, right? Because the frequency field of our gathering, the frequency field of true satsang, is the frequency of love itself. That what facilitates, what's holding the space here is love. And when we actually open to that and we give ourselves to that, where it was spoken by Yeshua, where two or more are gathered in my name, then here I am, then God is here, right? So where we gather and we say yes with the heart that just wants God, just wants love, just wants this truth, even if there's discordance and all kinds of crazy dysfunction playing, it doesn't matter. That's part of the human life. It will tidy itself up, but it won't tidy itself up by trying to live a life, trying to fix it and change it. It tidies itself up as this incredible morphing of the field at the frequency level, where the repatterning happens in consciousness at the higher, more refined frequencies of consciousness, not at the level of effect, but at the level of the causal field, right? It just, we shift the frequency, because once we open to God and the glory, we're operating at a completely different frequency field where love is here. And so just to say yes, just to be here, to be infused here. The glory is that we don't need to know how. We don't need to have answers. We don't need a strategy. We don't need a system. We don't need a teaching. We don't need anything. It's okay if we have a pull to certain teachings and lineages and things that enliven us, but in truth, we don't need the phenomena that goes, a lot of that goes with all these things. It's very, very simple, the technology. The light illuminates, and the illumination of light eliminates the belief and concept of shadow. The technology of love is an all-encompassing field where there is only one, and the welcoming, including, and embrace reveals in that illumined brightness that there's only one thing happening here, and it is love, right? And the whole field is one field of grace, right? So there's something very simple that we don't actually need to learn or understand or have a strategy for. All that actually happens is that as the sharing in this way particularly just comes, there's a transmission of this frequency field because it's what's here, and the living embodiment of it here shares the frequency of that, and the shared frequency of that invites an attunement, not a teaching, an attunement. It's like a field. So we join in the field, and the field is active, and it's initiatory, and it's inviting an attunement. And what's attuning is not someone, not a mind. What's attuning is the intelligence. We're all made of divine light, resonant intelligence. So the intelligence attunes. And as it attunes, the patterning of the configurations of the consciousness start to dance around and reorganize and clear and purify, recalibrate and refine. And the whole frequency field of the functioning of each being, whatever there is the availability for and a readiness for, will reorganize. And it's not about believing it. It's not about conceptualizing it. It's not about looking for measured outcomes. It's about saying yes in the heart and feeling the truth of it. And the yes in the heart and feeling the truth of it is aligning with the intelligence that you're made of and saying yes to the reorganization and recalibration, yes to being one with the divine, yes to allowing the divine to recalibrate the system as one system, not like, oh yes, divine, you can recalibrate me, but I'm going to be watching to see what you're up to because I don't actually truly trust you, right? It's saying, I am yours, great glory. I am yours. Do with me what you will, because I've always been yours. And actually you, great glory, have been the love that has been actually reorganizing the consciousness in discordant patterns. That too has been love. That isn't outside of this functioning. There's the recognition, great glory, thank you. You have reorganized me in discordant ways so that in this lifetime I have the possibility of opening and illuminating and not being powerless, but actually joining with the power and the inner strength, the courage, the divine will for a reorganizational mapping of consciousness back to the divine, instead of feeling like I am an island and I'm trying to map my life and I'm looking for something that I can map it to, right? So we go through the life, and so much of the spiritual journey is about trying to map ourselves to something that we feel a resonance with. I'll map myself to this teaching. I'll map myself to this teacher. I'll map myself to this guru. I'll map myself to this because I feel a resonance. So I'll try to find a match here. And there's something beautiful in that. But the place that we generally miss is that it's not out there. We're not trying, we're not mapping ourselves to something out there that's going to give us something. We're actually in that process. We're in revelation. We're in a living revelation, right? As soon as we feel an aliveness in the company of a teaching, a tradition, wisdom, a teacher, a guide, a way shower, a guru, whatever it is, as soon as we feel a resonant aliveness, we're in the revelatory field and we're one with that is enlivening us. But within our learned experience of I'm less than, there's something wrong with me, we immediately leave the revelatory field and we take that kind of falsely humble stance of being not worthy, of oh, I'm not divine, you're divine, I'm not divine, that's divine. I'll be devoted to and I'll worship what is divine. I'll make the idols out of what is divine, but I'm not, right? And so then do you start to see now everything that we're speaking about and how we've got this deeply rooted commitment to being divided and believing that it's loving to be divided and limited because of we got our needs met there, that all of that, these ideas of unworthiness and unlovableness and lacking and scarcity, it all feeds this idea of keep me divided, even though we're constantly opening to a revelatory field. So that is what is happening here now, is that we open to the revelatory field. And then the invitation is to not leave the revelatory field, to recognize that the revelation is your true nature, right? There's no one here that is more or less divine, that divinity is here and the glory of God is here. And yes, we are all in different phases of the moon, right? We're in different phases of opening to that. But there's no hierarchy in those phases. There's no hierarchy on the level of measure that means I am worthy and you're not worthy. That actually there's no hierarchy in love. Love just loves. And we know when we're in the presence of a non-hierarchical, unconditional love, because we can maintain the frequency of the love that we are. We can recognize it and we can feel free in it. And yet, yes, where we have these unconscious commitments, we will be pulled back in by the play of life, but we start to realize that love is giving us the frequencies of illumination. Love in the field is initiating us and bringing us activations and recalibrations of our consciousness that allows us to have more of a capacity to recognize the finer frequencies of consciousness and light that we are, and to be able to embody the finer frequencies of love that we are. And this is so important because if we keep the revelation abstract and we don't bring that light all the way into every single area of the life, those areas of the life will still feel to be discordant and shadowy, right? So it's this recognition that we have the capacity to embody the light and that we're being recalibrated for this embodiment to happen. And in a way, what this is a restoration of power to the source. And what this means is that we recognize that we're not being resourced. We don't get power from anywhere outside of the divine. That we believe within the imbalance of the collective consciousness, that we believe power comes through certain systems and structures and having certain things and behaving in certain ways that are very imbalanced power imbalances. That there's a kind of neurobiology of power and confidence that comes with having certain things within the structures of the imbalances. So we've learned that getting power is things like having money gives us power, being in certain positions and having certain kind of successes gives us power, and that if we don't have those, that we don't have power. So we hold on to these relational dynamics and these dynamics within creating ownership of resources that makes us believe that we have power, right? So that's a false idea of power. And it plays out very much within relational dynamics, that there's power imbalances. And it often plays out, although not exclusively, that the masculine holds some kind of subtle manipulative power over the feminine, that the feminine generally hasn't always found its ways of having an independence, and that's to do with something actually we're going to speak about on another time, because it's really a big and beautiful topic, but it's opening here. But what it really is about is are these, it's the dynamics of devotion, of true devotion, that that if a male biology hasn't fully embodied the feminine, there won't be devotion to the feminine. And so there will always be a subtle holding pattern over the feminine using these power structures, right? So that has to be rebalanced within our relational functioning. And if the feminine hasn't embodied the divine masculine, she will be looking to be rescued, to be saved, and she'll give away her independence and feel like she's looking for that masculine to be her savior, her guardian, right? And she won't fully embody a kind of independence and confidence. And of course, then within that dynamic, she's not inviting devotion, right? She's not inviting devotion. She's objectifying herself in some way. She's giving her power away in some way. And she's objectifying herself and she's giving herself in order to get something, right? Whether it's love or financial security, whatever, it's a dynamic that plays out very boldly in the imbalance of the collective consciousness. And within that, part of it is that the masculine the male biology has been so deeply conditioned to not feel and be in the depth of the emotional body in order to hold the power and not give themselves to the feminine, not hand themselves over to hold this kind of masculine and not come into balance. And that sense of not being able to fully open emotionally and feel will also then feel like a lack for the female biology, will feel like I'm not being emotionally met. But this dances in a very common dynamic. And what it requires, of course, is for us all to be very conscious about rebalancing power dynamics and to truly be open to realizing that power is not in things, it's not in objects, it's not in acquiring, it's not in manipulation, that power is in the source, that we only get power from the source. And every being has the possibility, regardless of biology, of coming back to the source power. And when we come back to the source power, when we know that we're resourced by the divine, a rebalancing happens where we're not moving from those subtly manipulative ways. And both biologies are equally responsible within the dance. And it plays back to the early life and the atmosphere of the early life and the unconscious commitments we made with our mothers and fathers, and that we're acting them out. And so within relational dynamics, often we're playing the mother or the father role for each other, right? And the willingness to actually bring the power back to source and to create a rebalancing and harmonizing in our lived experience, it shifts the dynamics of the life, but it also brings forward and will try to be flushing out and washing out the places where the female biology objectifies herself and isn't inviting devotion, and where the male biology isn't embodied to give devotion, right? So that's why as well, within these kind of relational dynamics, we often move from the lower chakras, right? We're not moving from the upper chakras. We're not moving from here. We're moving that the play of the imbalance moves from the lower chakras, which are about, giving and receiving and trying to find balance. But when we start moving in pure devotion, when every biology is in pure devotion to God, to the mother, to the glory, and is all about rebalancing, then all of those manipulative structures start to fall away, because we don't want them. We want love. We want to be living in absolute devotion. but we align our devotion with a rebalancing in our system where we're all completely embodying a balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and we're living in like a symbiotic devotion, a pure devotion, right? Where those imbalanced power structures are become extinct, let's say, right? That it's not about, you know, I love you because, it's not about what are you giving me? What am I getting? I'll give you this if I get that. It's a relationship stops being a bargaining ground where we're constantly trading the assets and the resources that we have available, right? I'll give you this for this. I'll give you that for that. I'll cook you dinner if you pay for this, you know. I'll give you money if you're available for sex, right? You know, it's these things are playing out in relationships left, right, and center. It's this dance, right? But when we actually say, whoa there, Billy Horse, that's not where I want to be living from. Every being wants to be living from a complete divine balance of heart. So then we come to recognize what true power is. True power is knowing that we're resourced only in the wide open field of love, that we don't need to be saved or fixed, or we don't need to use any kind of manipulative strategies in order to get love or to be resourced. That we know I am resourced in God. I am free in God. I am myself. I am true in God, right? So this is what we're up to, right? It's beautiful. It's so glorious and it's so intricate and magical, the possibilities as we really open to the intelligence of the field and what is being restructured, and what we are being invited into is coming to this ability to be with ourselves exactly as we are, where we are open as love, that we're not withholding ourselves, because any withholding is what is withholding within our internal functioning. We can feel like withholding is a kind of punishing. I'll withhold to punish you. I'll withhold to punish God, right? But any withholding is actually like an inner dynamic of shutting down to the love that we're longing for. And so when we really come to this moment in total openness, we're opening to ourself, we're opening to our inner dynamics, we're opening to recognize an equality and equanimity. We're recognizing that we're not whole if we don't embody fully a union of masculine and feminine, of Shiva Shakti in the heart. That if we are living from the lower chakras and the belief that our biology means anything, then we're living in a frequency dimension that is fearful, right? That is why even we could say in the big picture, there will come a time where we won't incarnate in the same way. This has been part of the play, but we won't incarnate in the same way. We'll remove the need for our bodies and the biology to the DNA will refine so profoundly that we won't need to move in this way. We won't need sexual interaction to create children, because it just will become completely extinct. And that's not a terrible thing for humanity, right? A lot of humans might think, oh my God, that's terrible. But it's not. It's the profound evolution that we're in the process of evolving out of this carnal system. And we're in the process of evolving to truly realize what we're here for, which is to remember the divinity, and that we're here to evolve into a pure devotion that brings us back to the source to the love, to the one, the glory, the reality. And of course, between now and where incarnating in divided biologies happens in the play of worldly time, that's going to be a lot of years. But who knows what's going to play out in between then and now. But it's fun to feel into the glory of the intelligence that is actually already here, right? Because as we evolve, who knows how we might be able to fast forward and just collapse time and collapse, thousands of years of seemingly what it would take to evolve. Who knows if we can't just open up to these frequencies and the play just morphs, right? This is what we're here to discover. This is the glory of what we're here to discover when we're not dabbling in the realms of division, limitation, the lower chakras, right? When we're not living in these relational dynamics that are imbalanced and trying to make them work, right? Let's stop trying to make it work. Let's start living from the source. Let's start living at the frequency of love and be in celebration. Let's go deeper, right? Right? Then I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? Let's go deeper than these subtle manipulative dynamics that are just a play of the collective power imbalance playing out in our relational dynamics. Let's go deeper. Let's embody pure devotion and unity in our hearts right on the surface of life.